Is it possible to watch the same online philosophy video twice? That's a joke, because we're talking about Heraclitus today. Here's some study guide questions to get us started. 1. Which of Heraclitus's cases motivate the view called unity of opposites? 2. Which strategy does Heraclitus seem to use to address these cases? 3. Which view of the cosmos does this strategy suggest, and how does Heraclitus confirm this? 4. Which puzzle about substances arises from this cosmology? 5. How does Heraclitus seem to address this puzzle about substances? 6. So, what, given these questions, might Heraclitus's Logos seem to be? Alright. As always, you'll want to have a pad of paper and something to write with, or a laptop, or at any rate a way of recording information and helping you internalize it as you watch the video, because the answers to these questions will appear. So, Heraclitus, unlike many of the pre-Socratics, deliberately wrote in fragments. The pre-Socratic philosophers famously only left us, or we only have fragments of what they wrote. In Heraclitus's case, this is deliberate. Heraclitus seemed to specialize in quips, or zingers, or philosophical one-liners, although he is credited with authoring a book, or more correctly, a longer work, since books did not really exist yet. Written works were on papyrus scrolls, but that's a topic for some other YouTube channel entirely, I think. And unfortunately, we only have fragments of this longer work. In the longer work, Heraclitus describes this Logos. Whenever you see the word Logos, you know that it's difficult to translate, but you should start with the English word account. Account is nicely ambiguous in the way that Logos is ambiguous. You might talk about giving an account of something, or what's the account. In this longer work, Heraclitus describes a Logos, an account, or a story. We'll go with an account. A truth, we might say. A truth that is staring people in the face. A truth that is obvious, but even when they're told it, they do not know it. They don't know it before they're told it, and they don't know it after they're told it, he writes. Now, the fragments of Heraclitus that we do have could be presented in a variety of different orders, and many. We're going to begin in the way that Aristotle advises all philosophers to begin, namely with the puzzle. We're going to see which puzzles Heraclitus seems to be concerned with. We're going to look at how he seems to address those puzzles. And finally, we're going to look at what sort of a systematic view he would have from doing all that, and conjecture at what this Logos might have been. To start out with, let's look at some of Heraclitus's fragments in which he describes a certain puzzling phenomenon. Here they are. The sea is the purest and most polluted water. To fishes, drinkable and bringing safety. To humans, undrinkable and destructive. Pigs rejoice in mud more than pure water. Asses would choose rubbish rather than gold. The most beautiful of apes is ugly in comparison with the human race. The road up and the road down are one and the same. The same thing is both living and dead, and the waking and the sleeping, and young and old, For these things transformed are those, and those transformed back again are these. In each of these observations, something, whether it's gold, or an ape's beauty, or water, is deemed to have contradictory property. It's deemed to both be valuable and useless. It's deemed to be both poisonous and life-giving. It's deemed to be both up and down, or young and old. How is this possible? At least, this is the puzzling phenomenon. Let's consider just a few. The sea, we're told, is both pure and polluted. These are opposites, pure and polluted. And yet the sea is paradoxically both. How? Well, it's pure to the fish, it gives them life, but it's polluted and toxic to us, since it kills us if you drink it. Or at least it makes you very sick. I don't know, I haven't tried. I bet it could kill you, though. Or consider garbage. To us, of course, it is absolutely worthless. But to an ass or to a pig, it's actually very valuable. And likewise for gold, which is valuable to us, but then worthless to them. So the very same things, garbage and gold, can be both valuable and valueless. Valuable and valueless are opposites, and yet garbage has it. Gold has it too. Just like how water in the sea is both pure and polluted. Or consider that the road up is also the road down. Suppose you are taking a road up Mount Olympus. If you are going up Mount Olympus, that same road would be the road down Mount Olympus if you were starting at the top. The road up is the road down. Relative to the bottom, it's going up. But then relative to the top, it's going down. Young and old, we're told, inhere in the same thing because these are turning into those. A young thing becomes an old thing. And as it becomes an old thing, it is old relative to where it is now, but then young relative to where it will be as it continues to age. It is both young and old relative to another period in its life or in its career, just as the road is both up and down, or just as seawater is both pure and polluted. What's going on here exactly? What we have is a certain puzzle and also a quick strategy for solving that puzzle. The puzzle is this: how can it be that ordinary things, such as roads, seawater, garbage, or gold, can have opposite property? And the solution is to relate those properties to different things. The suggested solution is to say that each thing has its features only relative to some other thing. It is only relative to us that seawater is polluted, but relative to fish, it is pure. It is relative to the person at the bottom of Mount Olympus that the road leads up, but it is relative to the person at the top that the road leads down. It is relative to us that gold is valuable, and relative to pigs that it is valueless, and relative to pigs that garbage is valuable, and relative to us that garbage is valueless, relative to a previous self in time that one is old, and relative to a self in the future that one is presently young, and so on. The idea is not just that some features of things are really relational or really dependent on a perspective. It's stronger than that. Heraclitus speaks of all things. All things have contradictory features, and all features are really relational in this way. To get a good idea of what the cosmos would be like, if you considered this: a fuzzy blue bug. The bug is fuzzy and it's blue. It's also a bug. Heraclitus might say, relative to me and my standard of vision, the bug is blue. But relative to my dog, or relative to a pigeon, or to someone who is in a different condition, the bug would not be blue. So it would be blue and not blue at the same time, relative to different viewer. Likewise for fuzzy. It's fuzzy to me, someone who can feel it with skin, but to another bug that only feels with an exoskeleton, it might not seem fuzzy at all. So relative to me it's fuzzy, but relative to a different perspective it's not. And even as far as it being a bug, we might say, has this perspectival feature too. Relative to one classification scheme, it's a bug. But then relative to a different classification scheme, it might be some other category. And so it is with all of the bug's features. There's no single thing that you could say of the bug which would not be complemented by a similar attribution that seems incompatible with it. All features are also accompanied by their opposites in this thing. What does the cosmos look like if you think this way? Goodbye, bug. Let's start with something simple. A circle divided into thirds. Let's say that the bottom third is red relative to the left third, but it's blue relative to the right third. And let's say that the left third is gold relative to the bottom third, and silver relative to the top third. And let's say that the right third is black relative to the bottom third, and white relative to the top third. So each one of the thirds has an appearance, but that appearance is relative to the other. So you have one single whole, however, each one of the parts has opposite features. It's red and it's blue, it's gold and it's silver, it's black and it's white, and in each case, one of the features is a relationship to one of the other parts. We can find confirmation of this idea in Heraclitus' own fragment. Here we are. Things taken together are whole and not whole, being brought together and brought apart, in tune and out of tune. Out of all things there comes a unity, and out of a unity all things. They do not understand how, though at variance with itself, it agrees with itself. It is a backwards tuning attunement, like that of a bow and lyre. In the same way that a bow or a lyre achieves its function by a certain tension among its parts. To propel the arrow, there must be tension between the bow and the string, and those are opposite forces, opposites inhering in the same thing. And just as a lyre would need to function by tension in the strings, pulling in opposite directions, opposite forces, so the unity of the function is achieved by an inner tension of opposites. Heraclitus is saying, the world is like that. Consider the circle divided into thirds. There's a tension. Is the bottom third red or blue? Relative to one part, it's red. Relative to a different part is blue. Is the left third gold or silver? Relative to one part, it's gold. Relative to a different part, it's silver. And so on. There is a tension among the parts, and yet a unity of the whole. In all things, there are opposite features, but those opposites are a distribution of relations across the entire whole, which is one. Now, of course, there's a problem with thinking this way. Consider the fuzzy blue bug again. There it is. Now, if the bug is fuzzy relative to me, but not relative to someone else, and if it's blue relative to me, but not relative to someone else, and if it's a bug relative to one scheme, but not relative to another, what is this thing on its own? All by itself, independently of me or you or any other interpreting, perceiving party, is it anything at all? The puzzle concerns the intrinsic character of things. Even if you don't think the bug has an intrinsic character, consider the cosmos as a whole. What is the world as a whole like? This is the puzzle of a thing's intrinsic character. What is it like on its own? We can find a clue to how Heraclitus handles this puzzle in a few of his fragments. Consider these. All things are in exchange for fire, and fire for all things, as goods for gold and gold for goods. Thunderbolt steers all things. Fire is want and satiety. So behind my perspective and another person's perspective and behind all the categorization schemes, what is the fuzzy blue bug deep down behind all those facades? Its intrinsic character is fire. It is fire formed one way or shaped one way, and as it is destroyed and as it is created, it comes from other fire and dissolves into other fire. That fire is the underlying substance behind all of the opposite property. Behind it all is elemental fire. But if underlying it all is elemental fire, if what that thing really is a fire that burns, what does it mean for the bug? What does that mean for all the ordinary objects we would believe in? At this point, it's worth considering Heraclitus's adage on the river, namely these fragments. Upon those who step into the same rivers, different and again different waters flow. We step into, and we do not step into, the same river. We are, and we are not. Taken by itself, of course, this is a profound observation that because every moment there are new waters flowing through a river, and because a river seems to be made up of just that water, every second you could say, isn't there really a new river? Well, strictly speaking, no, and it's probably the job of philosophy to explain why you can have the same river despite those appearances. However, there is a powerful analogy at work here, which is that in the same way a river might not persist through the exchange of water flowing through it, so might not any ordinary object persist from moment to moment, as new materials flow through it. Now, combine this with Heraclitus's observations about fire and about opposite. We find a world full of apparent contradiction, and underneath it all is just elemental fire. And as for the things which appear to be made of that elemental fire, they do not even last from one moment to the next. Think about a fire itself. Does a fire really remain one single thing from one moment to the next? Every moment it exists, new things are being consumed. A new instant of combustion, a new event of burning occurs. Even the fire does not remain the same from one second to the next. Now, I know that there are some Heraclitus scholars that are going to be very, very mad, and that there are interpretations of Heraclitus according to which he does not think objects are impermanent, and he does not think all the world of ordinary objects is an illusion, and da-da-da-da-da. But we are going with this one because it is a viable and interesting philosophical specimen to examine. And this interpretation proceeds well within the boundaries of philosophical propriety and the text itself. Now, if the cosmos itself were nothing but this elemental fire in an ultimate sense, would it even last from one moment to the next? Or would it be like every new instant there is an entirely new thing, as new fire cosmically burns? Well, whether that's true or not, we have at least one good guess at what, metaphysically speaking, Heraclitus's Logos might have been. Everything that appears to be is a momentary flicker, a short-lived contradiction in a sea of elemental fire. Is that right? And when I ask that, I mean both, is that true, and also, is that a correct interpretation of Heraclitus? What do you think? Either way, that's not exactly something that stares you in the face, that Logos. As we proceed further, we will be increasingly interested in this puzzle about substances, of what something is like by itself. What is the world like by itself? What are things like by themselves? Is there any sense in which you could speak of a thing's nature kathauto, by itself? Next time, we'll take a look at Parmenides, who thinks he knows what the world is like by itself, and it's a pretty interesting thing. See you next time.